Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Standing by with me is Mr. Mike Ejiofor, a former director with the State Security Service. You're very welcome to the program this morning, sir.
Thank you.
So there's quite a lot to look into this morning in terms of the security situation around the country, but let's start from what's going on in Nigerian prisons. We have heard from, of course, the Minister of Interior. If we have this issue of prison congestion, what are your thoughts on how that might affect the justice delivery and ultimately how effective our prison system will be?
You see, our prison system is very, very bad. Very bad in the sense that the capacity, most of them are congested, the welfare of the prisoners not taken care of for lack of funds, and the judicial process too is not helping matters. Because you see a situation where people are waiting trial can just be lumped into the prison. And some of them have been upward of 10 years, whereas if their matters or their cases have been tried, maybe 6 months imprisonment. Mm-hmm. So you see people staying in that place congestion. So we need to decongest the prison because, one, there is no fund to take care of their welfare. And even the welfare of the warders who take care of these prisoners. And that's why you begin to see a lot of corruption, people passing messages and all this. So it's a very big challenge. We can't continue to have jailbreaks. And, you know, as we approach politics now, a lot of arrests are going to be made and people will lump into the prison, thereby congesting the more.
We heard very recently about the prison break, I believe it was in Mina, and the consequent threat that that might have upon the civilian population there in Niger State. What are your thoughts about that?
You see, that one is a very serious one because when I read it yesterday, I was disturbed. One is a maximum security prison. And that means that suspects or prisoners in that place are high profile. And for such a break, with over 200 people escaping, it means a lot and is ominous to the society because most of these people who have escaped, they are not brought back to the prison, are going to wreak more havoc to the society.
We've heard very recently from the Comptroller General of Prisons, Jafaru Ahmed, and he's spoken about how the current daily feeding allowance for each prisoner in the country is approximately 300 naira per day, and how insufficient that has been. Can you just speak to prisoners' welfare, particularly in light of what you've talked about when you talk about some prisoners being in prison who may not have even committed a crime in many instances? Yeah,
that's the point I'm making. If you talk of 300 naira a day for each prisoner, what can that buy? So the situation is that people are supposed to go into prison to be reformed. Most of them come out more hardened because of the conditions they met in the prison. And bad influence, you mix hardened criminals with just simple simple offenders. And again, it begins to create problems. So I think the most important thing to do now is to decongest the prison as much as possible so that the meager fund being provided for their welfare will not necessarily taking care of them, but to some extent reduce the pressure on the prison.
When you observe the debates that go on around kind of what are the solutions that should be proffered to solve the all the kind of multifarious challenges facing the Nigerian prison system, you'll hear on one school of thought is that we should just decongest. You've alluded to that. Yeah. Another school of thought is we need to essentially build more prisons and really kind of enhance our infrastructure in that sector. What are your thoughts on that? Do we need to have a more effective balance?
It's not just building more prisons. I agree that some of our prisons are outdated, predating colonial days. We need to modernize the prison, not just building prisons. We need to modernize the prison because as we're going now, we're going to have politically exposed persons who have been in government going to the prisons. You can see the way people are doing this fight against corruption. You see high-profile, politically exposed persons being remanded in prison. So the earlier they start working on the prison because they don't know, our leaders now may end up in the prisons. So they should improve on the welfare of the, not just improving on the welfare, decongesting, speeding the judicial process to see that cases are disposed of, and most importantly, take care of the welfare of the warders. Because if you are thinking of people in prison, I also look at the warders who are there as prisoners, because their welfare is not anything to write home about, and it's very, very disturbing.
One of the interesting statements by the Comptroller General of Prisons was that the capital component of the budget, for example, in 2015, was approximately 4 billion naira only for an entire year for the entire prison service. I believe last year was about 16 billion. I think it's 16 billion again this year. But is that sufficient, though? Are we making sufficient investments?
There's no way it can be sufficient in view of the number of prisons and the inmates all over the country. There's no way it can be. But I think the most important is to reduce the pressure on the prisons by the congestion of the prisons. That's very, very paramount. I think the government has to look into that.
Now, let's transition into some of the unfortunate killings we've seen in recent times in places like Benue, Zamfara, Adamawa. There's obviously been a lot of talk around what should be done, what can be done. We've heard very recently from Vice President Yemi Oshibajo concerning this notion that he is clearly open to kind of looking at the heads of the security agencies and seeing if there can be some fresh blood injected. We don't know the mind yet of President Muhammadu Buhari. Is it time for a rejigging of the security architecture and the leaders of those agencies?
Well, I have said this times without number. You can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. I believe that our service chiefs have done their best, but we still have a lot of challenges. So maybe we need to rejig and re-engineer the security architecture for some fresh blood, fresh ideas to come in. Now, the greatest challenge we're having now, and I pray government finds a solution to it before we go into election, is the issue of herdsmen. Granted, our government has done much in the northeast against Boko Haram, even though we still have attacks. Today you hear soldiers are killed, bombs are exploding, you have suicide bombers, and it's worrisome. But the greatest challenge now is this issue of herdsmen. It's not restricted, especially in the North Central. There's no justification for killing of innocent citizens, especially in Benue, Zamfara, Taraba, Yobe, all those areas. Is worrisome because the effect, government is talking of agriculture, improving agriculture. We want to be exporting food to other countries. How do you achieve this when the farmers cannot even go to their farms? It's a very big challenge. The effects are going to be, in fact, the effects will not start manifesting now. It's going to manifest in the near future because farmers are no longer going to the farm for fear. If I just got an information yesterday. If you go to Delta, Ondo State, they are spreading. And the government appears helpless.